Thank you very much, President Schlissel. I appreciate the kind introduction, and the wonderful report from Ann Arbor. I had always thought, President Schlissel, that I had the greatest job in the world as a member of Congress, but listening to your report from campus may have just convinced me that there may be one job even better. So kudos to you. Thank you so much for what you do. Being on a Zoom with hundreds of people as a keynote speaker is really odd. So I've been thinking about an event early in my political career where I had the unfortunate obligation of speaking immediately after my friend, Senator Cory Booker. He did what he's masterful at. He brought the crowd to its feet for a thunderous standing ovation that continued through my introduction. Now, I was aware of what the crowd was going to get from me, so I rushed on stage and just pretended that all of that applause was for me. Now we're on Zoom, everyone's on mute. I can't hear anyone, so I'm just going to keep thinking about that reception and imagine that all of you are doing that same thing. So with that said, it is really a great honor to be with you. This is such a wonderful event. It's the 70th annual UMDC Congressional Breakfast. This is always a highlight of my calendar, and I want to thank Nicole and Alana and the rest of the club officers, directors, and committee chairs for organizing today's breakfast and all of the great work and events that the DC Club does and offers throughout the year. Thanks to Steve Grafton for your leadership of the Alumni Association. It is the alumni and the connections that unite us that makes the University of Michigan so special. And Steve, I'm proud of your work and the relationship that we've developed over the years. I want to thank the amazing Michigan DC government relations team of Madeline and Christina for your great work. This is also, as the president alluded to, this is the first Michigan breakfast that I've attended without the great Mike Waring, who announced his retirement last year. Mike is a giant on the Hill. He's been a part of every achievement on behalf of the university in Washington throughout his decades of service. And I wanted to acknowledge Mike. I want to share my appreciation for my incredible colleagues, those who represent the university so well in the Michigan delegation and fellow alumni, especially my dear friend, Debbie Dingle, whom I know is watching. Thanks to her. I also want to thank my Michigan team in my office, Josh and Joel and Wendy, for their help and inspiration in pulling this together today. Look, I wish we could all be together in person, there's no doubt, but a virtual program gave us a much better shot at landing really our special guest today. That is AP and Sporting News Coach of the Year and Big Ten champion coach Juwan Howard. Meeting virtually also gives us a unique opportunity to connect across the country and across the world. And for all those states represented, some number of those states are represented by old friends and roommates of mine, many who got up really early this morning on the West Coast to watch. And I'm so grateful to everyone who's watching and participating wherever you are in our country and around the world. And whether you're joining us from DC or Ann Arbor or anywhere else, welcome. Thanks for supporting UMDC's scholarship program. It's been over a year that we've moved meetings and conferences online. And while I certainly look forward to many happy in-person reunions that will be coming later this year, I also value the way that we've been able to connect virtually. At the start of the pandemic, I'm sure many of you shared my feelings of uncertainty and anxiety, confusion, and yes, fear. And amid that fear, I found myself reaching out to some of my best and oldest friends, and those friendships were forged in Ann Arbor. And since the beginning of the pandemic, I've been talking to my friends regularly. In fact, there are about a half dozen of us who have been meeting for Zoom calls literally every Monday night over the past year. And we commiserated over a tough and abbreviated football season. We reveled in the success of the basketball team's Big Ten championship and Elite Eight run. We remember the experiences that brought us together over 30 years ago. Skateboarding across campus, I did that. To get no dogs from Red Hot Lovers, that was even before I knew what a vegan was. Playing croquet in the Diag, we did that too. And training in the Arb. The University of Michigan taught me a lot, but just as importantly, it gave me lifelong friendships that have really sustained me and so many of us during these challenging times. And I just want to be clear, among those those lifelong friends that I have from Michigan is my best friend that I met on an outing to Zingerman's, and who this year, Jill and I will be celebrating our 30th wedding anniversary. That happens coming out of Michigan too, and I wanted to acknowledge Jill. The people who are watching this Zoom know that there is something unique about Michigan culture, and it's the warm feeling that you get when you come back to campus. But it's not just the milkshakes at Pizza Bob's, the chapatis at Pizza House, or singing the victors in the Big House. It's part of being a welcoming and striving and collaborative and diverse and brilliant family of students and teachers and alumni. And there's a reason that when I meet someone new, they know that the easiest way to break the ice is just to say, go blue. And there's a reason why those who didn't go to school in Ann Arbor so often, frankly, get annoyed when we can't stop talking about the University of Michigan. There's an expression popularized by Bo Schembechler that you all know. It's the notion of a Michigan man or a Michigan woman. Well, what does that mean? I think we have a perfect example today in our head basketball coach, Juwan Howard. Now, we all know and love Coach Howard. We love his dancing. We love his post moves. I especially appreciate his wife's Twitter feed. But what do I love the most about Coach Howard? What that makes him the definition of the Michigan man? Well, most of you know that Coach Howard was raised by his grandmother in Chicago, that he left Ann Arbor early for a career in the NBA, which culminated in 2 championships and the start of his coaching career with my own Miami Heat. But he promised his grandmother that he would graduate. So on flights across the country, as his fellow NBA players played cards or slept on the plane, Juwan wrote papers and he took tests. And Coach Howard returned to Ann Arbor and graduated from the University of Michigan. Promise kept. And while I appreciate the wins and championships from Coach Howard and the many, many more wins and championships that we're all looking forward to, what I admire the most about him is his devotion and his commitment to developing young men, not just their basketball skills, but guiding them as young men. If you play for Coach Howard, you're part of his family for life. And that's how I feel about my relationship with U of M. I'm part of a larger family. Getting together with my old Michigan friends this year made me think back on Big Chill director Lawrence Kasdan's 1990 commencement speech in Ann Arbor. He said, and I quote, "Your good friends from college may be the best friends you ever have. Guard those relationships like gold, work hard to maintain them. When they have a wedding, go across the country to be there. When one of them gets sloppy about keeping in touch, keep trying. And when one of them needs your help, cross the globe to give it to them. If you do that," he said, "if you work hard, your friends will become a precious touchstone in your life. And there aren't many things more valuable." Well, that was an incredible speech. You could say it went viral, but that didn't mean that it filled your Twitter feed or got millions of views on YouTube, although it probably has since. No, it meant that I printed it out. We all did, those of us who are my age, sealed it in an envelope, licked a stamp because that used to be a thing, and sent it in the mail. And as slow and tedious as sharing that speech the old-fashioned way sounds now, Kasdan lamented still that the hustle and bustle of the pre-internet age life in his address, and said, life is noisy. He said, everything we're told, everything about the way we're raised and educated and bombarded by our culture makes noise. And that noise makes it very hard to hear the ticking of our own hearts. Well, it is blindingly obvious that 2021 is a lot noisier than 1990. Today's noise is constantly ringing out from our phones, from the supercomputers we all carry around in our pockets. Today's noise is micro-targeted and it's data-driven. Now, what makes Michigan so special is that the community we share, the problems that we try to solve, the things that we learn all help us to listen a little bit closer to the ticking of our hearts underneath all of that noise. I want to thank President Schlissel for his commitment to amplifying the heartbeat of the University of Michigan through his initiatives focused on solving poverty, reducing carbon emissions, and saving lives from gun violence. These are problems I share with you and hope to lift up through my work in Washington. And whether it's protecting seniors from poverty and retirement, or putting price on carbon to seriously address climate change, or protecting our communities from the scourge of gun violence, the work I do here is rooted in the things that I learned 30 years ago on campus. Things I learned in classes like Jim Chafer's Urban Redevelopment and Social Justice, where I can see his lessons playing out each day in the headlines, like the awful shooting of Dante Wright in Minnesota and the inequities in our healthcare system in the pandemic. And while my work in Congress is rooted in classes that I took in my 20s, it's also aided by Michigan scholars today, like gun violence researcher Rebecca Cunningham at the Firearms Safety Among Children and Teens Consortium at Michigan. The University of Michigan is a leader because our scholars are doing the hard work to build the foundation of evidence that will help us tackle our biggest challenges. President Schlissel talked about this, but politics that fuel Washington often get in the way of solving our biggest problems because so much of the action is at the extremes rather than the middle ground. And as Kasdan pointed out in that commencement address all those years ago, he said, culture isn't interested in the large middle ground, and that's where most of us live our lives. And in the middle ground is where people sometimes succeed and sometimes fail, and where doing the best you can is what counts, where kindness and decency and courage are found in the smallest actions of people's lives. That's where we can find a life, an honorable life, a life of dignity. Well, Kasdan was right. The incredible value of that middle ground has been shown in countless ways throughout this pandemic. The brightest sources of hope over the past year have been through the ways that we showed support for one another in small and large ways alike. From frontline workers like grocery clerks and delivery drivers, gig workers going to work each day, to nurses and doctors risking their lives to save their neighbors, teachers juggling home life and a classroom of virtual students, and restaurants closing dining rooms and opening mobile meal sites to help feed their communities. And the University of Michigan has been a leader in every field of study to help support those frontline workers and improve our lives in this difficult time. From clinical outcomes to epidemiological models to engineering 3D printed touch-activated hand sanitizer dispensers, to the impact of the stress of the pandemic on substance abuse, to studying how COVID-19 impacted services for people with disabilities, the list goes on and on and on. And as of last night, there were over 1,040 articles listed in the Michigan COVID-19 related research publications database. And the scholarship that's helping the world through this crisis is part of a long history of leadership that stretches back to 1914, when the University of Michigan opened the first ever hospital designed specifically to prevent the spread of contagious disease. And that's on the site where the medical school stands today. So I want to thank everyone here for being part of the Michigan community that stoked my passion for public service, that informed my understanding of how I can make a difference, and has supported me all along my own personal journey. And as we continue to recover from the pandemic, and as I prepared for this meeting today, I'm so looking forward to returning to Ann Arbor to once again meet with students, take in concerts at Hill Auditorium, cheer along with crowds in the Big House and Chrysler. And I know that you're all committed to carrying on the long and storied legacy of the greatest university in the country, because you've felt the impact that the Maize and Blue has had on your life. And that's why I want to leave, I want to leave you with thanks for your support for the UMDC Scholarship Fund and for your commitment to expanding access to the high quality education that the University of Michigan provides. I'll finish with this. When John F. Kennedy spoke from the steps of the Michigan Union at 2 a.m. in front of 10,000 students in the closing weeks of his presidential campaign in 1960, and we know that because there is a placard, there's a monument on those steps that I stepped on every single time I walked out of the Union. When he spoke late that night, first he gave Harvard a new name. He called it the Michigan of the East. He also launched the Peace Corps, and he said this. He said, "This university is not maintained by its alumni or by the state merely to help its graduates have an economic advantage in the life struggle. There is certainly a greater purpose, and I am sure you recognize it. So many of you in the Michigan Club of DC came to Washington to pursue that greater purpose that President Kennedy described. In fact, it is the recognition that the University of Michigan has given us opportunity to always seek that greater purpose. And through that pursuit and a planet made better by the ways more than 500,000 living alumni, each working toward their greater purpose by contributing to our world, that is what it means to be the leaders and best. I want to thank you again for this incredible opportunity. Congratulations to the UMBC Club, and go Blue.